Okay, so I've added the rest of our planimetric data that we're going to need for this model. What we had before I think was a good representative kind of mass model to drop some notes on. As we get further into our planning, we're going to need a little more detail. So I've added, we have our parcels, we have now sidewalks in here. The buildings are the same. Streets are the same. We have parking lots. This is our study area boundary, and I have an outline and a fill. I've also added in detached garages, which will need to make faces and extrude. And then there was a layer in here called trails. There's a small little trail on the college campus. One of the things I noticed as I was going through adding in the sidewalks, there's a couple things that are going to need a little more cleanup. So just to make faces got rid of, or helped a lot, but there's still a couple problems here. You can see on this one right here, if I do make faces, it's just making the interior face and it's leaving our sidewalk sort of empty. So that's not the face we're looking for. So I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this face, and we got to figure out why this face isn't creating. And there's a couple things that prevent that. One is there's a line, two lines that aren't connecting to each other, or sometimes there's like a small little hairline maybe cutting into the geometry that's preventing it. And so there's some things we got to do to kind of troubleshoot. Easiest thing to do is start dividing this into smaller areas to kind of figure out where the problem is. So what I'm going to do is just draw a line right through the middle, and I can see that it filled on the right side, but the left side is still empty. So that's telling me my problem is somewhere in this white area. So I can continue to kind of, now I can drag a line this way and I can see the top filled. So I'm zeroing in on where that issue is. I can repeat it. And so it's coming right into this corner. So oftentimes that's where you're going to find the issue. There's another plugin that we use. It's called Stray Lines. And so if I click on Stray Lines, I can label them all. And I can see that there's two stray lines in this area. And so when I zoom in, I can see that those two lines aren't touching. So that's our issue. I'll delete those labels that stray line added, and I'll just close off that edge. And sometimes when you're in too close, so to do, I'll just delete that and connect. There we go. And so we've now fixed that edge. I'll go ahead and just delete all those lines that I drew trying to find the issue. So we've repaired that one. The other area is this. If I double click in here, I can see this face is sort of, this center part isn't cut out. So one of the things I'm going to do is kind of isolate this area off from the rest. You'll see if I deleted that face, I lose all the sidewalk fill. So I'm just going to draw a line like this, and what that's going to mean is if I delete that, the rest of the sidewalk stays intact. And so while it all should come back once we fix whatever the issue is, sometimes it can be a little quirky. So we're basically going to do the same thing. And so we know the issue wasn't in this part. It's going to be somewhere in here. So it's this, somewhere in here is our issue. And it looks like it wasn't anything significant. It just kind of healed itself as we went through. So can be a little tricky, but oh, you know what? I found another error. All right, so we ran into an issue here, and when we imported these planimetric shapes, we imported them to their real-world space, the coordinates given to us by GIS. And what can happen when we do that is we're real far away from 0, 0, which is the home point of the SketchUp model. And what can happen, I don't know if it's the calculations with all of the decimals of the coordinates, but you start to get a weird kind of clipping that can happen. And so as you're working at something, if you zoom in too far, you can lose your whole model. But what we can do at this point, just to prevent that from happening, is we'll take everything, turn everything on, and we're going to move everything, our entire model. Now we don't anticipate having to add any more data, so we don't necessarily have to worry about the keeping that point of origin into real space. And I'm just going to move the entire model closer to 0, 0. So we'll add in a fill for our sidewalks. So we can start turning on the layers. The other thing I added was detached garages. That was something, so it's a different type of building. So now we got our garages in there. These are those opportunity sites, the streets, the parking, detached garages, and then trails. Let's see, we need to also make a color for these trails. I don't know why they, at this point, you know, probably just makes sense to color them the same color as the sidewalks. So again, I'll double click it, hit the paint bucket tool, and then I could just eyedrop off of the sidewalk and then fill it. All right, so we're moving towards a fully detailed model. I do have a boundary file. So this is our boundary. And then I also have a fill for the boundary. And I think what we can do with this is we can color this green, almost like a grass. You know, put the streets on top of it, our parking lots, the buildings, and let's see if I reset our scene here. Oh. So we moved our model, and now our scene reference is broken. So what we need to do is zoom extents. It brings us back now to where the model is at basically the same angle, and then we can update our scene. So this is the same export. We've just changed the reference to closer to 0, 0. Okay, so we have basically everything we need. There's a couple things I want to do with the boundary. So we made the fill green. This is like a outline of the boundary. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this just a black, and I'm going to elevate it a bit. So with the move tool, click on an edge, and then I can lock inference to the blue axis, and I don't know, let's bring it up like 50 feet. I think it should be fine. And so we have kind of our study area outlined. Might be a little too far with the shadow, so let's, I'll move it down 30 feet. So it's sitting like 20 feet up in the air. We can see now the parking lots, everything is really kind of coming together. Go ahead and save it. And the last thing I want to touch on are these railroads. So this is imported right out of the planimetric data. You can kind of see we're getting like the actual switch lines. A little too much detail for what we need. So what I'm going to do is get into here and really kind of just, and then what I'm going to do is go into the 3D warehouse and just add a Metra train. So I can click up here to get models. It's going to call up the 3D warehouse, and Metra is the commuter rail service in Chicago. So I'll just type in Metra, and here's a Metra locomotive. So we can just download this model, we can load it right in. And so here is our train, and this is their train station. So let's drop it there. We'll come in, oh, we got Susan sitting in here. We can delete her. Now, a weird thing that you can see is happening here, we get this sort of a shadow and then there's this matte gray. Well, what's happening is we moved our ground layer down 4 feet, but you can see here on the shadow settings, it's displaying it on the ground. So it thinks there's still a ground plane there even though we've moved it. So what we need to do is uncheck that. And that issue goes away. Now we have a train. We'll put on the track. Now the other thing we need to add to this train are some passenger cars. So we'll go back into the 3D warehouse, and I'm not too particular. Just drop it down there and then I'll rotate it. You can see there's a curve in the track, so a couple of things I can do here, but first thing I should probably do is group these together. When you bring stuff in from the 3D warehouse, you can see that we now have layer 1. Something in these models is in layer 1. Everything else looks like it was drawn in layer 0, which is good. But what I'm going to do is create a new layer, and now it might make sense for me to move the railroad onto layer 40, so I'll just put 41 as the train, and I'll make the railroad layer 40. So, and now I'm going to make this a group, and I'm going to put that group on our train layer. So now I can move the train all at once. So this train, I know a big issue in this community is when the passengers are coming on and off, they block this intersection. So let's extend it down to here. I can come into the group, and either if I want to be hyper detailed, I can delete some of these cars. It looks like they've are using components, 4 different components. So I shorten the train up a bit. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to explode this down to the actual car. It's quite a few little groups here. And there we go. Even in this component, something is weird. If I go in and edit this component, there's something over here. It's preventing that bounding box from okay, and to move it, I can actually use this car as a reference point. So I'll move from there to there. This will be the easiest one to move. It's just taking another train as using another train for distance. I basically have moved that car the proper length. And if I wanted to repeat that, I can hit 2x. Oh. I think that's good enough for what we're trying to do. And so now, if I look at this, looks a little better. We got our parcels are on by default. I'm going to turn them off and then update this scene. So when I do click that, the parcels don't come back on. And I should probably now repair this train that I've exploded. So I'm going to make it a group and put it on this train layer. And I can delete this layer 1, and it's going to say that there's material in here. It's something in this train. I'm going to move it to the default layer, which is layer 0, which is where I would have moved it anyways. And so that turns the train on and off. So we'll go ahead and repair this street. So we'll delete these 2 segments. I could do this, but there's a chance when I reconnect these, they may not come back. So what I'm going to do is really just draw in a new street segment. Okay, so this goes now beneath the railroad. So if I turn on our railroad layer. And what I will do is I'm just going to draw a perpendicular line there and there. And just cleaning up those line works so we're getting a fold at those lines. So this should do it. I'll move it down. I do have an edge in the middle of this. I can just soften that edge with the Soften Edges command. And so there's the underpass. I do have to now come back in and repair these streets that went over top of the road. And we'll do this street. Just cleaning up these little stray lines, and then we want to repaint this. When we drew in that new piece, it changed the default material, and then when I erased it. So just with the bucket tool, we'll come in and paint all the roads the same color. All right, so I can reset the view, and now take a look. We have our boundary layer now is sitting above, and so what we'll want to do is drop that piece of the boundary down below the road as well. So let's see, so I will go to Colors and Model, and I have my green. You can see now we've added all of these different swatches from when we imported that train. So I'll click the ground layer, and I'm going to drop the opacity so I can see where our road is. And we're just going to have to kind of create kind of a seam in here. So what I want to do now is bring this into Photoshop, and we'll do some play with the line work by default. So the edges are on. What we like to do here is sort of soften up those edges. Cleanest way to do that is in Photoshop. So when you do your export, it's going to export what it sees on the screen. You'll want to turn off your axis. If you have any guides, delete any guides. And then what I'll do is going to export 2D graphic. And let's call this downtown color with edges. Well, I usually do a bunch of different exports. So I have color with edges. One of the things I'll do in the style is just turn everything white. So make it monochrome with edges, downtown. So let's call this mono with edges. We'll export it. And then I'll turn off the edges for both of them too. There is sometimes we may, we're looking for a desire, like a look. Back in 2008, there was a style competition for SketchUp to develop a sketchy style. One of the ones that I submitted and ships with SketchUp is called, I think it's Darker Lines with Trace. And what I want to do is drop that in, and sometimes it'll, so here's our sketchy edges, or sorry, Style Builder competition winners, and pencil sketch with darker lines. So this is one that I submitted. All right, so I have 5 different images. I'm going to load them into Photoshop. We have 5 separate files, so I will start on this color without edges, and what I'm going to do is first drop on the mono with edges. So just copy and paste that on top. And what I'm going to do here with the transparency is change this to multiply. Sort of the appearance of this is really what SketchUp would have put on with the edges. The multiply just gets rid of the white. So this is essentially the same as downtown with edges, but what I'm able to do here is come into this, these are our edges layer, and I can drop down the opacity to kind of soften those edges up. These are my sketchy edges. I'll bring it into the same file. And this one we want to do way more subdued, so we'll change this to multiply, and we'll drop this opacity down to 25, and it just adds a little more texture into the image. So I think I'm happy with this. I actually only used those 3 drawings. So what I'll do here is save this as a downtown base. I'll save it as a Photoshop file in case I need to come back in and make edits. If I print it off and the edges are too light, I can always come back and tweak that opacity. And so now we have a nice base map. I'm going to bring it into Illustrator, add a few street names, and drop in a few labels for those opportunity sites. And so here is a nice little map that highlights the development opportunities in downtown, and we're going to sort of focus in on this one, Site 1, and provide a more detailed development concept for that development opportunity.